record this, and then we're going to share the screen so those students at home can hear the same lecture. This is, like I said, one of the most serious moments that I've ever seen. And the country now is in shock. And if you followed the events from yesterday, which ironically started about 20 minutes after my last political science class ended in what had been just a normal day in the nation's capital. But let's just do a few things first, okay? And I'll send an email clarifying all of this a little bit more for you this afternoon. But here's my website. You guys probably all know where it is. Don't worry about writing it down because I'll send it in an email to you. And if you go to that website, and I'll escape out right now, this is where we have the lectures. Okay, now the lectures are real easy to find. So you go to the website, maybe you come to this page, you can use the menu here, or you can click this link here, it doesn't really matter, and you'll go to the poli-sci page, all right? Now, I'll post today's lecture sometime around noon today for the students at home. This was the lecture we gave last time, and the study guide for this one is pretty straightforward. It's doing a little background research on Biden and Harris, the new president and president-elect, vice president-elect. And there's the readings right there. So it's real simple. And then there's a question or two where today is going to take on a different meaning when you're going to assess why Biden won and Trump lost. Very simple question. It's not very hard. I'll point the list up that I gave you last time very quickly. So if you'll just kind of do that, because next Monday, well, you guys will be Tuesday, won't you? We'll then have another lecture. So we'll have 2 lectures and then another study guide. So that's kind of the cadence that will follow. So 2 lectures, 1 study guide. Now on the study guides, let's go back here and view this again. There'll be multiple assignments. Basically, I need you to consider this college level course at about 5 hours a week. So 2 hours of lecture, and then we'll have 3 assignments in the study guide. Now, I don't know if some of you will need the full 5 hours. Most of you can probably do it in a shorter period of time, which is fine. But be complete in your answers, and there'll be 3 assignments in there. So you're going to get an automatic participation grade, which will be numbered in SIS at 1P, 2P, 3P, all the way through to the 30 or 32 lectures that we give. The essay questions, which is really important, 30% of your grade, they'll be marked with an EQ. The research reports, which is our bigger, longer assignments, we'll save that for the State of the Union address, but I'll give you a score here. So you'll have a 1 EQ on this last little thing, and then there'll be a little note thing, and it'll be worth 10% of the grade, so it'll be 1 N. And so you'll be able to know which lecture just by the first number, lecture 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then 3 of these 5 different categories. All right, we can tell you right away, the most important categories are this one and this one. They're worth 30%. Then next would be these exam questions, which are going to be for the state test. And they'll be very specific. It's open book, open note. You should be answering all 100% right. And that's 20%. And then this is just, showing up, listening to the lecture, completing your study guides basically, and answering the questions from the lecture. Now, I don't want to go into any more detail of that. It's just a standard a GPA format, and you can pick your own grade. You basically, if you want to work for an A, you can get an A. You just have to be willing to do the work, or if you make a mistake on an essay and don't write well, just redo it and you'll be able to get an A. There's no deadlines. The only deadline is the last day of the semester, and everything has to be in by then. All right, well, let's get to the serious topic of the day. The Constitution is under attack by the President of the United States. This president, and we listed 13 things that cost him the election, crossed the line yesterday in dramatic fashion. The morning started out rather normally, where we find out that in Georgia, they elected 2 Democrats to the Senate, which means the Democrats now control the Senate going forward. Kamala Harris will be the tiebreaker. There's 50 Democrats, 50 Republicans. It's split 50-50. And so that came as interesting political news in the morning. And then at 1 o'clock, they were to open up the electoral college votes from the states and in a very routine ceremony led by the vice president, read out in alphabetical order who got how many votes. And it's just a very ceremonial type of thing, but it was turned into a political rally. These are the two senators that won, Ossoff and Warnock. I'll talk more about them later. But I want to set this up a little bit. I don't want to just launch into this without giving you a little bit of background, a little bit of framework here. What is a constitution? The Constitution is an overriding set of laws laying out the foundation of our democracy. It's the oldest written constitution in the world and lays out the rule of law, not the whims of one individual, not the person who considers himself to be the president of the United States abusing his power and doing whatever he wants. There's checks and balances that say the law is more important. And the law said we should count all the votes. We should then have our electoral college vote, and then we should read those out in the Congress with the current vice president reading that out and declare the winner. That was all to happen very much yesterday. Now, the Constitution's first paragraph is called the preamble. In the preamble, we the people, first three words, that's the most important part, of the United States in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, and let's put this one in here, ensure domestic tranquility. The President of the United States broke this rule yesterday, personally. He did it. Provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity to establish this Constitution of the United States. When the president took the oath of office 4 years ago, he swore, according to the Constitution, this is written in Article 2, I do solemnly swear or affirm that I will faithfully execute the office of President of the United States and will, to the best of my ability, preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States. He didn't do that yesterday. In fact, it was quite the opposite. What we had was a mob that formed at the White House at the president's encouragement. He encouraged his fanatical supporters, many of them white supremacists, Proud Boys, KKK members, to show up. And then he rallied them in front of the White House at a place called the Ellipse. He spoke to them for over an hour and encouraged them to march down Pennsylvania Avenue toward Congress. And the rest was inevitable. Our country is centered in the House of Congress. Article 1 is the legislative branch, House and Senate, in that beautiful building that was just being finished the last time we were under such an assault, when Abraham Lincoln was president of the United States, and he had to take the oath of office too, as the country was launching into the Civil War. What happened yesterday was an affront to everything the Constitution stands for. Now, I'm not going to mince any words here, guys. You're going to hear it straight. We literally had our Senate and House under siege, had to evacuate the vice president, the Speaker of the House, all of the members of Congress, and both houses were attacked. Here is the Secret Service with guns drawn as people are trying to pound down the doors to get into the House of Representatives, where people were huddling for their own safety and security. It was a shock. And this, again, with their flags flying, with the Confederate flag finding its way into the Congress. They didn't find its way into the nation's capital during the Civil War. And 4 people died yesterday. Let's go ahead and look at how this was portrayed in Europe, because around the world, they're in shock. And the United States has lost its place in the world as of yesterday. People are stunned around the world, just to say the least. And this is the BBC coverage from England. Here we go. I think I have it here.
Events in Washington have taken a violent and tumultuous turn in the past few hours, as thousands of supporters of President Trump stormed the US Capitol building, venting their anger at the victory of Joe Biden in the presidential election. They forced the evacuation and lockdown of Congress itself, where lawmakers were all set to approve the election result. Shortly before the clashes, President Trump had addressed his supporters near the White House, telling them that he would never accept defeat. Within the past hour, President-elect Biden called on Mr. Trump to tell his people to go home, and within minutes, that was indeed the message delivered from the White House. We'll be live on Capitol Hill shortly. First, we'll have this report by our North America editor, John Sopel.
The peaceful transfer of power, the cornerstone of American democracy, seemed a highly abstract concept today, as Trump supporters clashed with police as they tried, and succeeded, to storm the Congress, where America's elected leaders had gathered to certify the election victory of Joe Biden. Earlier, in a rally outside the White House, Donald Trump encouraged his loyal base to fight to overturn the result of this bitterly contested election.
We're going to walk down to the Capitol, and we're going to cheer on our brave senators and congressmen and women, and we're probably not going to be cheering so much for some of them, because you'll never take back our country with weakness. You have to show strength, and you have to be strong.
Many of his supporters needing little encouragement to join.
Okay, before we hear this next bit, let's just review what he said. In an hour-long speech, he whipped them up into a frenzy. He had other people speak as well. And when they marched down Pennsylvania Avenue toward the Capitol, the die was cast. The inevitable was going to happen. Let's listen one more time so you know exactly who started this. Here we go.
To the Capitol, and we're going to cheer on our brave senators and congressmen and women, and we're probably not going to be cheering so much for some of them, because you'll never take back our country with weakness. You have to show strength, and you have to be strong.
Many of his supporters needing little encouragement to join the fight.
We're here to support, if violence happens, like it happens, but we're not going to start it. We're just here to defend ourselves. With blood. Yeah.
Sorry, say that again.
I'm a Mexican immigrant. I support Trump. Freedom is paid for with blood, and tyranny always masquerades itself as safety and security. And that's what we're fighting against right now.
Outside the Capitol, the outer ring of security had been breached. The crowds had taken Donald Trump at his word, and they were taking the fight to the heart of American democracy. They were literally banging on the doors of Congress. And then some Trump supporters managed to get inside. They were armed and wandering the Capitol building. There were tense and violent scenes with police who'll have never dealt with anything like this. These pictures appear to show a woman protester being shot inside the Capitol building. A stretcher was sent in. She was later given CPR. A protester breached the inner sanctum of the chamber. The vice president had to be removed to safety by his Secret Service detail. And then she was later given CPR.
I'm going to pause this for a second right here.
A protester.
That is where the vice president sits. And he was there minutes earlier to count the votes to certify the election of Joe Biden as president of the United States. And he had to be literally hustled out by the Secret Service for his own safety. And here is one of the Trump supporters taking that sacred seat and making a mockery of the whole thing. This is absolutely the most outrageous thing I have ever seen, because more 9/11, we were attacked from outside. This is an attack from inside our own country, a domestic terrorist attack against the most important building in our democracy and against Congress. The violence here is unthinkable.
breached the inner sanctum of the chamber. The vice president had to be removed to safety by his Secret Service detail. And then the joint session was adjourned. Earlier, the Republican Senate leader, for so long a loyal lieutenant of the president, turned on him with this withering assessment.
This election were overturned by mere allegations from the losing side, our democracy would enter a death spiral. We'd never see the whole nation accept an election again. Every 4 years would be a scramble for power at any cost.
And the vice president, who's officiating over this joint session and has shown Donald Trump near slavish loyalty, also said it was not his role to overturn the verdict of the people. My oath to support and defend the Constitution constrains me from claiming unilateral authority to decide which electoral votes should be counted. And he went on, the presidency belongs to the people and to them alone. And the president-elect has gone on television to warn that American democracy is under unprecedented assault. And he made this appeal.
I call on President Trump to go on national television now to fulfill his oath and defend the Constitution and demand an end to this siege, to storm the Capitol, to smash windows, to occupy offices, the floor of the United States Senate, rummaging through desks, on the Capitol, on the House of Representatives, threatening the safety of duly elected officials. It's not protest. It's insurrection.
Democracy put on hold. Outside, they were scaling the ramparts, the mob for the moment in charge, believing they have the right to overthrow the will of the people. Tonight, the shining city on the hill, as America likes to describe itself, feels as though the light of democracy is flickering dangerously. John Sokol, BBC News, Washington.
John's report there would...
All right. That gives you a glimpse of what happened yesterday. And literally, for me, it was like 12 hours of watching this insanity. But what I feel good about is that the FBI gets in, clears all the rooms. They found pipe bombs. They've had to dispose of some bombs. They had to clear these people out, and it was rough stuff. But then 6 hours later, the senators and the members of the House walked back into that building, fulfilled their constitutional duty, read off the Electoral College votes, and declared Joe Biden the next president of the United States. They did their job. There were some senators who contributed to this, and their names will literally go down in infamy, no doubt about it. There are some other people that will too. We haven't had a chance to introduce this guy yet, but this is President Trump's lawyer. And he was at that same rally before this crowd, this mob, this group of insurrectionists, these domestic terrorists. Before they had a chance to speak, they were inspired by this lawyer who's been running around with terribly fallacious, no evidence lawsuits, trying to overturn this election. Here's what he said.
Let's have trial by combat. I'm willing to stake my reputation. The president is willing to stake his reputation on the fact that we're going to find criminality there.
Let's play it again. Ready?
Let's have trial by combat.
What is the mob supposed to make of that? Well, we now know. And then we listen to Don Jr., the son of the president. We'll play a clip of him.
Fact that you are all here on this rather cold January day tells me all I need to know. And it should be a message to all the Republicans who have not been willing to actually fight.
I'll jump ahead.
Or you can be a zero. And it's today. You can be a hero, or you can be a zero. And the choice is yours, but we are all watching. Oh.
So the crowd took that as permission, and they marched on the nation's capital at our sacred democracy and stopped the count of the Electoral College. Definitions. Don't worry about writing these down now. They'll be in the lecture. In the next study guide, I'll have you make sure you know these definitions. What we saw was an attempted coup, a coup d'etat, which is an illegal, unconstitutional seizure of power by a political faction. This is a political faction, a political group of radicalized people who really want to tear our government down. Usually it's a military coup or it's some sort of dictator, Trump acting as a dictator. What does he expect? If they stop the election and proclaim him king, what did he think was going to happen here? We have to come to the grips with the fact that perhaps our president is delusional, that he's not living in the real world, that he doesn't understand what's going on around him. That's a real possibility right now. The removal of an existing government from power, usually through violent means. Here is the Confederate flag being paraded through the halls of Congress. This flag, the symbol of white power, the symbol of supremacy, the symbol of the Confederacy and the Civil War, never found its way into these halls during the Civil War. And now it's being paraded through. This month, sometimes 20, 25,000 people. Here is that person, like I'm saying, takes over it's called the dais. It's the seat of the vice president of the United States in the halls of the Senate. Here is somebody sitting in Nancy Pelosi, the Speaker of the House's seat, who luckily had been whisked away to safety. This is insurrection, an act or an instance of revolting against the established government. It was a revolt. Sedition is subversion of a constitution and the incitement of discontent toward and rebellion against the established government. When we heard the president, when we heard Giuliani, when we heard Don Trump Jr., they were being seditious. Sedition. These are terrorists. What does it mean to be a terrorist? It's a very specific definition in the law. Using fear and violence to push a political ideology. And that's what they did. Now, thankfully for us, especially here in Utah, we have people we can believe in. And Mitt Romney, once again, as he has done again and again and again, stepped up as 6 hours go past. The city of DC is put under curfew. They have then secured the premises, and I don't know if you know this, but the Capitol building has these elevators, and they go down into these tunnels that take them to office buildings. So they were able to escape out. They were in these Senate office buildings, and they came back through the tunnels, got back into the halls of justice, and they were able then to finish their work. And Mitt Romney gave this now famous speech. Of all the Republicans in the whole Congress, he is the most important member now and the stand-up guy. And luckily, we can be proud to call him a Utah. Here's what he had to say.
Today was heartbreaking, and I was shaken to the core as I thought about the people I met in China and Russia and Afghanistan and Iraq and other places who yearn for freedom and who look to this building and these shores as a place of hope. And I saw the images being broadcast around the world, and it breaks my heart. I have 25 grandchildren. Many of them were watching TV, thinking about this building, whether their grandpa was okay. I knew I was okay. I must tell you as well, I was proud to serve with these men and women. This is an extraordinary group of people. I'm proud to be a member of the United States Senate and meet with people of integrity as we do here today. Now we gather due to a selfish man's injured pride and the outrage of supporters who he has deliberately misinformed for the past 2 months and stirred to action this very morning. What happened here today was an insurrection incited by the President of the United States. Those who choose to continue to support his dangerous gambit by objecting to the results of a legitimate democratic election will forever be seen as being complicit in an unprecedented attack against our democracy. Fairly or not, they'll be remembered for their role in this shameful episode in American history. That will be their legacy. I salute Senator Langford and Loeffler and Braun and Daines, and I'm sure others, who in the light of today's outrage have withdrawn their objection. For any who remain insistent on an audit in order to satisfy the many people who believe that the election was stolen, I'd offer this perspective. No congressional audit is ever going to convince these voters, particularly when the president will continue to say that the election was stolen. The best way we can show respect for the voters who are upset is by telling them the truth.
By telling them the truth. Your side lost by 7 million votes. You lost in the Electoral College. The states did their job. They counted. It was the most accurate, probably the most secure election in American history. Thank goodness. These people have been lied to. And Mitt Romney said it, I think, better than anybody else. Let's go back and listen to that last little bit.
The president will continue to say that the election was stolen. The best way we can show respect for the voters who are upset is by telling them the truth.
By the way, that was a standing ovation. There's only a few senators in there, 100 of them, and they gave him a standing ovation when he said that. You can see them here.
That's the burden. That's the duty of leadership. The truth is that President-elect Biden won the election. President Trump lost. I've had that experience myself. It's no fun. Scores of courts, the president's own attorney general, state election officials, both Republican and Democrat, have reached that unequivocal decision. And in light of today's sad circumstances, I asked my colleague, do we weigh our own political fortunes more heavily than we weigh the strength of our republic, the strength of our democracy, and the cause of freedom? What's the weight of personal acclaim compared to the weight of conscience? Leader McConnell said that the vote today is the most important in his 36 years of public service. Think of that. Authorizing 2 wars, voting on 2 impeachments. He said that not because the vote reveals something about the election, it's because this vote reveals something about us. I urge my colleagues to move forward with completing the electoral count, to refrain from further objections, and to unanimously affirm the legitimacy of the presidential election. Thank you, Mr. President.
Here, here is right. And we can be very proud to be from Utah and to have him representing us. The next leader of the Senate, Chuck Schumer, also spoke. Some of the best speeches I've ever heard. And I've been listening to speeches since 1960. And some of the best speeches I've ever heard were last night. In the almost 7 hours it took them to finish this process. And here was Chuck Schumer's view. Here we go.
Mr. President, it is very, very difficult.
Now, when he's saying Mr. President, the vice president is the president of the Senate. So he's talking to Mike Pence. So when he says Mr. President, he's talking to the president of the Senate, Mike Pence, the vice president of the United States. He's not talking to Donald Trump there. So I wanted to make that clear for you.
Mr. President, it is very, very difficult to put into words what has transpired today. I have never lived through or even imagined the experience like the one
we have just witnessed in this Capitol. President Franklin Roosevelt set aside December 7th, 1941, as a day that will live in infamy. Unfortunately, we can now add January 6th, 2021, to that very short list of dates in American history that will live forever in infamy. This temple to democracy was desecrated, its windows smashed, our offices vandalized. The world saw Americans' elected officials hurriedly ushered out because they were in harm's way. The House and Senate floors were places of shelter until the evacuation was ordered, leaving rioters to stalk these hallowed halls. Lawmakers and our staffs, average citizens who love their country, serve it every day, feared for their lives. I understand that one woman was shot and tragically lost her life. We mourn her and feel for her friends and family. These images were projected to the world. Foreign embassies cabled home their home capitals to report the harrowing scenes at the very heart of our democracy. This will be a stain on our country, not so easily washed away. The final, terrible, indelible legacy of the 45th President of the United States, undoubtedly our worst. I want to be very clear. Those who perform these reprehensible acts cannot be called protesters. No, these were rioters and insurrectionists, goons and thugs, domestic terrorists. They do not represent America. They were a few thousand violent extremists who tried to take over the Capitol building and attack our democracy. They must and should be prosecuted to the full extent of the law, hopefully by this administration, if not, certainly by the next. They should be provided no leniency. I want to thank the many of the Capitol Hill Police and Secret Service and local police who kept us safe today and worked to clear the Capitol and return it to its rightful owners and its rightful purpose. I want to thank the leaders, Democrat and Republican, House and Senate. It was Speaker Pelosi, Leader McConnell, Leader McCarthy, and myself who came together and decided that these thugs would not succeed, that we would finish the work of that our Constitution requires us to complete in the very legislative chambers of the House and Senate that were desecrated, but we know always belong to the people and do again tonight. But make no mistake, my friends, today's events did not happen spontaneously. The president who promoted conspiracy theories that motivated these thugs, the president who exhorted them to come to our nation's capital, egged them on. He hardly ever discourages violence and more often encourages it. This president bears a great deal of the blame. This mob was in good part President Trump's doing, incited by his words, his lies. This violence, in good part, his responsibility, his everlasting shame. Today's events certainly would not have happened without him. Now, January 6th will go down as one of the darkest days in recent American history. A final warning to our nation about the consequences of a demagogic president, the people who enable him, the captive media that parrots his lies, and the people who follow him as he attempts to push America to the brink of ruin. As we reconvene tonight, let us remember, in the end, all this mob has really accomplished is to delay our work by a few hours. We will resume our responsibilities now, and we will finish our task tonight. The House and Senate chambers will be restored good as new and ready for legislating in short order. The counting of the electoral votes is our sacred duty. Democracy's roots in this nation are deep, they're strong, and they will not be undone, ever, by a group of thugs. Democracy will triumph, as it has for centuries.
And that right there was an example of the unbelievably great speeches that we heard last night, and speaking in favor of our Constitution, our way of life, our form of government, and who we really are. And we've got to reclaim that. This president is now finding himself at the very bottom of presidents in American history, if you can't even call him a president right now. This is an historian's view right here. Do you realize the last time that the Capitol building was overrun was in the War of 1812 in 1814 by the British Army? The Capitol has never been occupied like this ever since 1814. Here's an historian, Beschloss, who's very good. The verdict of history will be scathing here. And let's go ahead and just play this little clip from Beschloss. Let's see if it comes up this way. I think I've got it on a different loop here, but okay, so hang on. Okay, here's the volume.
Put this, his Twitter feed is a work of art of social and historian activism these days. Michael, I've been thinking about you a lot because of what we're witnessing today. There's an obvious callback to what happened to the Capitol building in the War of 1812. But can you believe we witnessed an event today that has us reaching back to the War of 1812?
No, and thank you, my friend, for your kind word. Did you or I ever think that we would be living through a day like this or a night like this? Here we've got, just as you were saying earlier, a terrorist event, just as there was in the middle of the 1812 war, or near the end of the 1812 war, August of 1814, when the British burned the White House and the Capitol, or the attack on Fort Sumter, 1861, or 9/11, which we all remember. But the difference between those things and what we saw today is this, a terrorist attack on the Congress and the Capitol, was initiated by the President of the United States. We have never seen that before. I hope we will never see it again. You saw that speech this morning. Donald Trump spoke to that angry mob that he had summoned to Washington and told them, march up Pennsylvania Avenue, maybe I'll even march with you, he said, up to the Capitol, take back our country, stop the counting of the ballots, the stealing of this election. And the result was this attack that resulted in 4 deaths today, the vandalization of the United States Capitol, some of our most sacred rooms. And then while it was still going on, this person who calls himself a president goes into the Rose Garden that he and his wife eviscerated last summer and talks into a camera and puts on Twitter a video in which he says to the mob that's there rampaging through the Capitol, we love you, we think you're special. That's not something that any other president of the United States would ever have done in American history. The presidents that you and I remember, if there's a riot, if there's some kind of a national emergency, they try to restore order as quickly as possible. And the questions remain tonight. How much was Donald Trump involved in the planning for this terrorist attack today? Was this a conspiracy? Why were his cabinet members so quiet? Why hasn't anyone resigned? We have no idea. Those questions are hanging in midair.
And since he asked that question, there have been multiple resignations, and there's bound to be more. And we're talking seriously now about a constitutional amendment called the 25th Amendment. By the way, those people are all on camera, and these are very serious crimes. This is supposed to be the most secure place, especially since 9/11, most secure place in the country. And they stopped the people's business, the people we elect to represent us and to represent us in Congress, to give life to our country and to our Constitution. They had to stop what they were doing on our behalf as terrorists took over the Capitol building. So when the president takes this oath of office to preserve and protect and defend the Constitution, I say that's not what's happened. It was exactly the opposite of that. I could use a very tough word here. I won't. But they may need to impeach him again or use this, the 25th Amendment. The 25th Amendment, whenever a vice president and the majority of either the principal officers of the executive departments, meaning the cabinet members, transmit to the president pro tem, who's the one of the leaders of the Senate, and the Speaker of the House of Representatives, a written declaration that the president is unable to discharge the powers and duties of his office, the vice president shall immediately assume the powers and duties of the office of the acting president. Is it time to remove the president under the 25th Amendment? Or should he be impeached again? He is out of power already. Even calling the National Guard is normally something the president does automatically during times of crisis like this. It was Pence and the Secretary of Defense and Nancy Pelosi, Speaker of the House, and the leader of the Senate that had to make that call. They're already making the decisions. And it just seems like we have a situation. Remember what the Constitution said, well, excuse me, the Declaration of Independence said. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. The president can't make himself more equal than anybody else. No man is above the law. And are endowed by their creator with certain inalienable rights. Among those are life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. Normally we stop right there, but we should keep reading, because it said that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men through our Constitution, deriving their powers from the consent of the governed, not from the whim of one person whose ego, to quote Mitt Romney, has been damaged because he lost. He lost decisively. And wow, aren't we glad? Even many of these folks here who voted for him now are going, wow. If we'd have known what was going to happen, we would have no doubt either not voted or voted for Biden, because this is just, you can't explain this behavior other than to say maybe he's got some serious issues that need to be dealt with, but not, politically, but medically. Now, the biggest presidential in 120 years, biggest presidential election. That's what it took to unseat this incumbent. And so when we look at this, we want a return to normalcy. And Joe Biden will give us that. And now that he's got control of both the Senate and the House, he can do exactly that. This really opens up the door, what happened in Georgia. And before we end today, I want to go back to George Washington. And George Washington, the father of our country, who led the Constitutional Convention for its entire time, was integral in its structure and how it came about. He was the person, when we talk about this, who made that Constitution possible. And he gave a farewell address after his 8 years as president. He said, we should be slow and thoughtful in amending the government so it isn't, quote, weakened and thwarted by unjust men. Avoid factionalism. What you saw was a faction of people, a section of people, not very many, 20, 30,000, that form a fanatical faction that are willing to be violent, commit acts of terrorism and sedition and insurrection to get their way over the rest of us. Remember, all men are created equal? Well, they think they're more equal than we are. And avoid sectionalism. We'll talk more about that later. He warned against the dangers of political parties to the government as a whole, that when we start fighting and not working together in a bipartisan way, like Mitt Romney has done in the last months, he's done such a brilliant job of that, we're in peril. And he also warned against political retaliation against your political opponents. The president wanted, before the election, wanted to have Joe Biden arrested. It's just incredible. What we had was an election, it's called a referendum on the incumbent. Basically, this election wasn't so much about Biden, it was about Mr. Trump. and he was rejected by the American people. It was, as we can now see, very much the most consequential election in our lifetime, maybe one of the most consequential elections in history because of what happened next. And yet there were these enablers, members of Congress, we haven't seen this since the 1850s, who are behind this, who are willing to thwart the democracy and object to the vote, led by this guy right here. His name's Hawley, Senator Josh Hawley of Missouri. Here he is giving the power symbol to the mob before they invaded the Capitol building. And he led this objection to this vote count within the halls of the Senate. There's blood on his hands, said his local paper in Kansas City, Missouri. He is complicit with this. And the names of the 7 or so senators that made this a charade, and over 100 members of the House that did that, well, their names are going to be written on a list in history that is not going to be very flattering, let me tell you that. But thankfully, the vice president pulled it all together with Nancy Pelosi and the senators. They got together and at 2 a.m. this morning, certified the election. And it was a brave thing, and it was a wonderful thing. And you should know this, that when you lose an election and you're the incumbent, your average among presidents, among the 45 we've had, is around 34. If you win, the average is around 14. But Mr. Trump will not be among the greatest presidents. He will be among the worst. Already, we've had one major poll from Siena University that in 2018, put him down at 42. This right here should drop him below Andrew Johnson. So you may have just witnessed the collapse of the worst president in American history. And that's a sobering thing to say. But there are better days ahead. I can guarantee you that. In a dozen days, we'll get back on our feet again. We'll start over. We'll repair the damage. We will create a more perfect union. We'll get back on our feet with the help of Democrats and Republicans together who now are sobered by this experience. And let's never repeat this insanity again. We have to be very careful when we pick presidential candidates because the wrong person may accidentally win. And that's what happened 4 years ago. That he was not stable then, and a lot of people knew it. It was actually pretty easy to see if you listened to him in the debates. And he never really served as president. He watched TV all day. He Twitter feeded all day. He was not actively engaged, played golf incessantly. He never did the job. And yet he wants to hold on to power? It's a sad story. It's a tragic story. And we fought like crazy for 4 years, and that has just got to stop. All right, well, it's a sobering day. There's no question about it. And we just want you to do that first study guide. Let's look to the future. Let's look to the positive. Let's see what makes Joe Biden tick. It's a short essay. Let's see what makes the first woman vice president in American history tick. Let's see what they offer. And you have a short question. What are the 5 reasons why Biden won and Trump lost? And you can assess what you think your top 5 are. It's just your opinion, what you think the major factors were. It's not really a long thing. It's just to make a short list. And so it shouldn't take you much time. But I love this country and I love the Constitution. And to watch our Congress, our House of Congress, invaded by domestic terrorists was just one of the most shocking things I've seen in my entire life. So we will rise from this. Trust me that. I know that. I know it for a fact. So you guys take care. I'm going to stop this recording so I can post this for the kids at home. And you guys have a good day because there's better days ahead.